Welcome, and thank you. It's my pleasure to be able to present the SFPE 2021 annual report. So let's start with financial statements. Just looking at the last couple of years, we see that we're at the highest state of revenue that we've been in. 2021 was the best year. Again, this is 2021. Some data on 2022 will be available through this, but mostly this is focused on 2021, but the best revenue we've had thus far. And looking at our expenses, a little bit lower in 21 than 2019. As we all know, 2020 was a very disruptive year, but I think overall doing well, and we're back under our expenses. We didn't have to do much travel in 2020. Travel kicked up a little bit in 2021, thus the expenses went up. Now looking at the balance sheet for the total assets, a lot in due to the investments and how well they have grown. I know things have changed more recently, but they have grown pretty significantly. If you see the investments in here, we're now up to almost 9 million at the end of 2021 total assets. Comparing that with our liabilities and net assets, we're still ahead and the healthiest we've ever been financially. Of course, this looks as of July of this year. We've all seen some disruption in the market. We work with a really good investment firm that helps us through this, makes really solid decisions, and helps us make very careful decisions as to what we do, but hopefully over time, everybody's will come back. So you look at this, the overall historic revenue and expenses, you see our revenue has generally increased. We had some disruptive years there, but I think we're creeping back up there, and we keep our expenses below our revenue. Revenue being blue and expenses being green. So for the 2021 and 22 board of directors, in 2021, Jack Poole was president. He's now past president. And I am president this year. Jimmy Johnson is president-elect. Amanda Kimball is, again, the secretary-treasurer. And Nicole Boston is the CEO. So we stay focused on our mission, which is define, develop, and advance the use of engineering best practice, expand the scientific and technical knowledge base, and educate the global fire safety community to reduce fire risk. That has not changed, and our vision is to be the leaders in engineering a fire-safe world. Our strategic plan goals, I won't go into detail, but they focus on 4 key things. Advocate for the profession. We need to let people know what we offer and what value we provide to deal with the challenges of fire. We're very much focused on inclusive environment. And that is one of our main strategic goals for 21 through 23, 21 being the first year of our strategic goals. Professional practice, that's about competency and ethical practice, and then technical leadership, handbooks, all those different documents that make us technical leaders in fire safety, fire engineering. Talking about our membership, marketing, and chapter relations, which is members and chapters are very key to SFPE and very important to us. The member that is the chair of this committee is Craig Besley. Kevin Miltowski deals with the community. You'll see his name throughout. Community engagement, marketing, and communications director. Ben Fogel is our membership manager. Kristen Griffiths, who just joined us, corporate relations and business development manager. Welcome, Kristen. And Austin Garazi, our marketing manager, and Ava Perdowski, chapter engagement manager, and Hilda Strasser, membership and marketing assistant. This is a great team. Lots of different great things have been occurring with this team and moving ahead. There are 7 subcommittees within the Committee on Membership and Chapters. The Award Subcommittee, Craig Besley is the chair. Chapter Relations Subcommittee, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Subcommittee. So we have William Clay for Chapter Relations, Jonathan Burnell for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Fire Service Subcommittee, Brad Cronin, Membership and Growth and Engagement Subcommittee, Sean Donahue, Qualification Subcommittee, Sarge Slicer, and Student Outreach Subcommittee, Matthew Delshausen, who's the chair. So some data on membership. The blue is new members, whereas green is the drop members. We did see quite a drop, but that has to do, 2021, 2020 was some strange times, but a lot of people are retiring. But we're seeing, the reason we have 2022 data on here is to show you that it's going back the other direction, and we're retaining a lot more members. And we'll talk about, we have quite a few student members as well, but this is dealing with paying members. And so a little bit of member history, again, because things have been so strange, we've added 2022 in here as well. But one of our lowest was in 2021, but again, the disruption and all the different changes out there, we're kind of back on the rebound with all of that. Of our members, just to get a sense of which kind of members are we talking about, we have our member versus professional members. We have just over 2,500 members. We have just over 1,200 professional members, and we have 192 fellows and 630 students. And this is as of 2021. We have more student members now. We're actually at the highest rate of student members that we've ever had, which is really exciting. So we have 27 student chapters, 630, this is as of 2021, 630 student members, and 33 recent graduates. So again, I think it's important to see not only that was 2021 pretty amazing in terms of having a high member of student membership, but look at 2022, it's only going up. So I think that is a very promising. We've never been at that level, and hoping that that is all these new folks that are coming through are going to really strengthen the society over time, even if a lot of people are beginning to retire. In terms of where these members are at, North America, just over 3,000. Europe is actually second in our list, 365. Oceania, 171. Asia, 144. Middle East, 93. Africa, 41. And South America, 24. So I know a bulk of the members are in North America, but we're growing in other regions. I won't go through the details here, but this is sort of the top 10 states: Maryland, California, Massachusetts, Texas, Illinois, New York, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Florida. An interesting slide here is the number of women in fire protection engineering that are at SFP members. Right now, the actual sort of paying members, those that are not student members, I should say, only 10% of the members are women. And that's been fairly steady for a little while, I believe. But what is amazing to me is seeing the number of student members that are women. That's one of the demographics we're able to track fairly easily in terms of diversity. So it's a nice little clue as to how we're increasing our diversity within the membership. I just hope, I know that statistically sometimes we need to make sure that that 24% continues on, but I think it's a really good sign that we're increasing the number of women in the society. And looking at like, where were people born? Who are the members in terms of which generation? And actually, I mean, they're not the same, but the 60s, 70s, and 80s, which is the decade they were born, are not that far off from each other. And 90s is growing, and of course 2000s is pretty low because they're just kind of really entering this and getting involved in associations and things like that. And we're seeing obviously the older generation starting to retire more and the numbers starting to go down. But I think it's healthy that we have multiple generations that are just as strong, if you will. In 2021, we had 9 fellows inducted, 535 recipients, 41 professional members upgraded, 14 Society Award recipients, 8 Foundation Award recipients, and the awards for chapter excellence, the ACE winners, we had 14 gold, 15 bronze, and 15 silver, and 13 bronze. Standing committee, I find this number amazing, and I forget the depth of how many people are really involved in what we do. Right, in 2021, we had 910 volunteers. A big bulk of them are RTM, which is research, technical, and documents. It's 514, so it's the bulk of the folks are involved in that. Then we have the folks involved in the membership in chapters, professional development, and professional qualifications. So really amazing. A couple of years ago, we're talking, we had maybe just over 300 or 400 maybe, and now we're up to 910 volunteers. couple of special interest groups to note. The first is Women in Fire Protection Engineering. That's sponsored by FM Global, and we really appreciate that sponsorship. It's been really a neat opportunity because there's so few women in the organization. It's an opportunity for us to network, because often you go to meetings and there's, just that 10% maybe. I haven't actually calculated it every time I go to the meeting, but there's not as many of us. So it's an opportunity to meet people. And then when I got to see them last week, for instance, the storage symposium, it was nice to make that connection. Emerging professionals, getting those younger engineers to have that network, be able to connect with one another. The fire service, which is frankly very key to what we do, is having them on board. There's many of our members are both engineers and in the fire service, which is an interesting perspective, but very important that we keep that connection with that special interest group. And then students, of course, we want to keep all these students engaged and bring them through the overall organization and have them be members in the long run. And in general, to facilitate more fire protection engineers or fire engineers in the industry, membership or otherwise, but we really want to facilitate folks staying involved and looking at the value of what we do. And of course, as we said, we couldn't do this without Corporate 100 partners. We have 56 partners, I think, as of 21. Visionary, we have 7. Benefactor, we have 10. Patron, we have 11. And Sustainer, we have 28. And of course, I mean, we can't thank you enough for what you do. And many of those 900 people, I'm sure, are involved in many of these organizations. So we very much appreciate all that level of not only the corporate sponsorship, but also supporting the organization from a volunteer perspective. In 21, we've done some more chapters in 22, but in 21, there was 5 new chapters, 2 student chapters, Hefei student chapter, Shanghai student chapter, the Nigeria chapter, Denmark, and Finland. Very international. It's just amazing how our chapters are kind of, I would say, exploding maybe internationally, but they really are growing internationally, which is very exciting. And looking at chapter growth, it keeps going upward. It's always going upward. Some years not as much, but we're up to 114 in 2021. I believe in 2022, we're already up past 120, or just at 120. So this is pretty exciting stuff. And you can see by the breakdown where they're coming from, a good bulk of them are in the US. And then we have the student chapters that are quite a few. But we are growing. Europe, especially, I believe at this point, we're at about 20 chapters. And speaking of Europe, I just wanted to kind of go, this kind of overviews a couple of the different things going on with Europe. We have newly incorporated SFP Europe in July 24th, 2020 in Brussels, Belgium. And the reason for this is not another chapter in the sense that there's members, but it's an entity that we needed to be able to have SFP participate in committees like developments in their version of sort of ICC, NFPA, things like, to be able to participate, you need to have an entity within Europe. So there's a board of directors for that, for SFP Europe, but it's not a chapter in the same sense of the other SFP chapters within Europe, but very key. And we'll talk about some of that involvement that we're having because of that entity that we've created. We converted the SFP Europe conference in March of 21 to virtual. As you recall, that was still a pretty crazy time going on with COVID. But we were able to push the Marriott Berlin, as you see advertised now, for 2023. We just renegotiated a contract to do it a couple of years later. So that's exciting and very beneficial for us. There's going to be, we're focusing more on European events, making sure we continue that. As I said, the participation with SEND committees, member growth, new chapters. We keep seeming to add European chapters on a regular basis. We're trying to focus in on what their education needs are, because they're a little different than what we might look for in the United States, for instance, or North America, I should say. On the board of directors for SFP Europe, we have David Grossman from Switzerland, Kees Both, past chairs from Belgium, Wojciech Wierzyński from Poland, Robert McNamee from Poland, and I am the president. I actually got to meet with them just this past year in person, which was really great to be able to do. And because of the SFP entity that we created, we have 4 representatives on SEND committees. TC 127, Fire Safety Engineering, and Axel Mossberg from Sweden. I just want to point this out because I feel like this is really important stuff that we're able to get involved with. TC 156 Smoke Control, Gabrielle Vian from Spain. TC 191 Fixed Fire Suppression, James Bassett from Switzerland. And TC 250, the Eurocodes, Mohammed Haidari from France. In our magazine, we have year after year of successful magazines. This was the series from last year. As you've seen, we've had, more good publications coming on this magazine each year. But some interesting things on the key issues out there: building information modeling, low flammable gases, where have we come since 9/11, what have we learned, and then heritage structures. Our technology journal continues on strongly. Guillermo Rain is editor-in-chief. It's published by Springer, and it's available digitally. Members get this for free, and it's 6 times a year. Some web traffic through January 21 through December 21. We had quite a few, if you look at that percentage, a pretty high percentage of new visitors, which is a good sign. And our biggest web traffic, this kind of gives you which country are they coming from. Most of them the US, about 60%, and after that, United Kingdom. I guess it makes sense from the number of members that we have in the US, but it gives you a sense for where we're getting the contact from, the review on our website. And of course, and I know Kevin is working very hard on this, we're active on Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. In 21, we increased from 8.5K to 8.9K followers. LinkedIn increased from 11K to 13.2. And Twitter has been fairly active, and YouTube views are fairly active. So good way to get out there and communicate with folks. And we also have the jobs aspect of the website. There's 337 FPE applicants in 21, 103 employees sign up. There's 568 total as perspective of employer signups, 71 postings in 21, 388 total job postings. I think this is the most fascinating. There were 70,000 job views in 2021. That's 70% more job views in 21 than in 2020. Interesting. There's a lot of interesting dynamics going on out there right now, but I found that to be fairly interesting. And there was 840,000 impressions in 2021. Not only do we have the magazine, but we want to continue, and we have social media, but we also have other ways of communicating. We have weekly news briefs. We have about 17K folks in distribution. And as a snapshot FE magazine, there's 5,700 unique readers, 16,000 article views, 100,000 page views, and SFP Europe is customized a little bit more for what Europe is looking to hear about. There's a distribution list of 20,000, over 20,000 people. So it's getting a lot of information out to folks. We also have a foundation news brief, the weekly news brief, foundation news brief, and they have FE Extra and SFP Europe news brief. So a lot of different communication. On the membership and chapter committee horizon, continue soliciting nominations for Society Award, and we encourage folks to really think about folks that might be interested in these awards or that you think are worthy of these awards. Continue receiving applications to elevate members from member to professional members or to fellow. We want to keep making SFP as inclusive as possible. These are sort of the things that they're looking at and thinking about and working on. Their launched SFP Mentor Match Program, recruit new chapters and strengthen existing chapters. And Ava with SFP staff has really done a lot with that, and I've very much appreciated. Launched a new competition for students studying fire protection engineering, and launched communication, chapter outreach, and events to meet these needs for the emerging professionals. So a lot going on with that committee. I mean, there's a lot of subcommittees as well, but very helpful. Research tools and methods. The chair is Greg Baker in New Zealand. The chief engineer, Chris Jelenowitz, also known as CJ. Codes and standards administrator, Ryan Tunkel. Intern, Theo Saywell. Contractor, Giselle Gimero, and contractor, Daniel Morasuti. Very busy. And like I said, you saw that graph before of how many people are involved in those committees. It's pretty amazing, and a lot of work going on. Sort of 3 aspects of this group, I guess. The RTM subcommittee, standards oversight subcommittee, Steve Wollen's the chair. Codes and standards subcommittee, Matt Davies the chair. and Research Roadmap Subcommittee. Brian Hoskins is the chair. And these groups are basically responsible for coming out with things such as the handbook. This is the 5th edition of the SFPE handbook. And of course, it's the definitive reference of fire protection engineering, and now has 3 volumes. We are working on the 6th edition and should be published in late 2023 through Springer again. Available in electronic formats, the first time that's happened. It's been interesting to see how that's been responded to. This graph shows, I mean, every time you have a new edition, you're going to see a spike and then kind of goes down. And so the last edition, of course, was just paper. This one includes both the print and still some purchases of the older edition, I think, and then the ebook. We'll talk about like downloads of sort of chapters and things like that in a minute. But I mean, obviously the first year was the most, and then it kind of goes down after that. This is showing the handbook downloads. You can download a chapter, you can download pieces of it. The numbers, I mean, in 2020 really went up high, but they're still pretty steady considering the handbook came out several years ago. This document I find very useful and has been discussed even in circles outside of fire protection engineering, which I'm pretty proud of because I think it's a really good document for peer review. And it was updated a bit for more defined description of qualifications that are aligned with the technical core competencies that were established by SFPE. It complements SFPE Code of Ethics for fire protection engineers, more detail on components of peer review, and added content related to the limitations of the document, and is available free digital download. There's been over 1,800 downloads. I might be one of them. More recently, we published the 2nd edition of the Very Tall Buildings Guide, which I think is exciting and necessary. We've seen a lot of things happen in the last couple of years, but they've added provisions for existing building considerations, energy storage systems, aerial vehicle platforms, unique features, also updated some areas where their technology is changing or things are changing dramatically, or we learned some hard lessons along the way. Structural fire protection, facades, building envelope, notification. I mean, the bringing in that social media and how that affects what we do when it comes to human behavior and notification. And times egress analysis, of course, that technology is increasing. So the computer models, all of that information was uploaded and it was placed into that document. And there's been over 7,000 downloads of this document. Also working on right now, it's set to be published in the fall of 2022 as Engineering Guide of Fire Risk Assessment. Some new information in a variety of things, such as risk communication, risk perception, sensitivity analysis, and uses examples that reinforce topics discussed in the guide. And a whole bunch of things are under development. Some of them, we have about 5 standards under development. Several of them are new, such as the fire scenarios standard and performance-based design standard and design fire standard. Some are updates and a couple guides, especially the existing building guide is a new one. We're also updating substantiated computer model guide. Codes and standard development, I spoke of this and the emphasis in RTM on this concept. This is part of advocating for our profession and getting folks to know about our resources and what value we bring. So the work with NFPA, they've submitted over 400 public inputs, and SFPE guidance standards are referenced in over 400 times in NFPA documents. As I noted, we're working with SEN groups. That's sort of just getting started a little bit more, but I think is really beneficial. ICC, there's been some code change proposals and things like that. And in that case, we often have to reference things that are mandatory, so we can't really reference guides, but we're assisting and kind of just, I think these groups also provide that mechanism to make that connection between the technical world of fire protection and putting that depth of knowledge in those processes. So I think that's important, and being visible and being able to participate. And then we participate in ISO liaison and TC92, SC04, which is fire protection engineering. What drives a lot of what needs to happen for research, and this This feeds into what the foundation is doing. It's really important. We have to prioritize what our research priorities are in the world that's getting far more complex, trying to find out how we fit in. But this is very useful and is maintained by one of the RTM subcommittees and will continue to be developed as things change. And we'll talk about the research roadmap a little bit when we get to the foundation as well. So the professional qualifications. Now, this is the group that deals with things like PE licenses and potentially credentialing and things like that. So Doug Fisher is the chair. Chris Delano, CJ, is the chief engineer involved with this. And again, Kevin Miltowski involved with this process too. A lot of what we need to do needs to be communicated. And there's 4 subcommittees on here: Engineering Practice Subcommittee, Higher Education Subcommittee, PE Exam Development Subcommittee, and Professional Competency and Credentialing Subcommittee. So pretty active. I mean, very key to what we do. Not only do we need to know what we, for education, we need to demonstrate that we have these competencies, and this is how we demonstrate it through professional qualifications. Looking at exam statistics, things have been a little different because we've switched from paper. You see P and then we see for the computer. 2020 was the first year that happened. Of course, an odd year for that to happen a little bit, but we had a fairly high passing rate, and 2021 went down a little bit. But this is sort of some statistics on some of these things, and we're adjusting to the new test and also some years with some strange ways things had to happen. What drives a lot of what we do too, of course, is understanding what our minimum technical core competencies are for fire protection engineering that were set back in December of 2018. What is competent? And this is helping us define it more in detail, and is also now listed under roles. Those competencies have been put under roles, and you could see that on our website to see how those roles are rolled up to match with our core competencies that we expect of a fire protection engineer. As part of this, there's been a lot of exploration of credentialing. We're not quite there yet, but we know that there's some desire for this, and we've been trying to figure out what makes the most sense. We've been working with consultants with a subcommittee to explore this idea. So we're still in that process, and it's kind of a topic where you have to both have that sort of educational piece, which is actually separate from credentialing, and then the credentialing, and then finding out who wants what. We already have, for instance, in the US, the PE license. Other areas like Europe don't have the PE license. So looking at what makes sense and what would be the most value to work with and get into the world of credentialing. But it's been very helpful to work with a consultant, because it is a very specific industry that you need to really understand all the aspects of it before diving in too far. Engineering practice, that's something that the CPQ kind of gets into, is going through the the advocacy messaging, identifying what is an FPE, how do you become one, who's qualified. So trying to incorporate existing projects into advocacy, including core competencies, career guide, professional development, kind of rolling that all together so we know exactly what it is. What is engineering practice? What an FPE does compared to somebody in a different industry? So some of the projects that they have underway, continuing with development of position statements to advance fire protection engineering as a profession. There's going to be a panel actually at the 2022 annual conference on delegated design. I know that can be a pretty big discussion, but it'll be good to be able to have that discussion and try to engage more and more with AHJs, because ultimately they're the ones approving what FPEs are doing. So there'll be some actual panel discussions at the meeting in Detroit as well that talk about some of those issues. So on the other side of things, that was professional qualifications. This is professional development. This is the education piece. Mark Fessenden is the chair of that group. Hannah Herron, as you've probably seen, and Aaron Purdy. Hannah is the director of education events. Aaron is the manager of education events. They work with all the webinars, all the conferences, and all those different things that go on. Just last week, the storage symposium occurred, and that's kind of falls under this particular area, and we're working on getting a manager of education development, because there's a lot to do and a lot to put out there, because there's a lot of information for core competencies that we need to provide the education and professional development piece. Several different subcommittees, course content development, ethics subcommittee, PE exam review course subcommittee, that's the education piece of preparing for the PE, the annual conference program subcommittee, and that varies year to year depending where it is and who the president is. European conference that's coming up next year, Udo Kirchner and Carl Wallish are co-chairs, and then storage symposium we had last week, and Bill Koppel was the chair. So participants, this is our annual meeting in Expo. You know, it was a couple of crazy years. And 2020, mind you, the number is high, but as you recall, 2020 was a virtual meeting. So it was a different format, but well attended. 2021, we ended up having, actually, sorry, this is the PE exam, got a little bit lost in the bud. It's a PE exam course. It's been a pretty steady growth. It kind of went down for a couple of years, and I guess maybe also leading towards the computer testing that grew a little bit in that time. A little bit more accessible now that it's also offered virtually more readily. And I think the world got more used to doing some of those virtual things in the last couple of years as well. So seminars, you've seen, you know, a multitude of growth. We had to do a lot of seminars. A lot of things shifted. It's probably a mixture of both. It's a mixture of both virtual and in person. We're starting to get back to more in person, but the virtual, I think COVID did open a silver lining of providing us more methods to get to people. And so we can reach to a lot more folks around the world as well. But we're holding steady and we're getting there and increasing the numbers as we go. And there was also the implementation of the learning management system, which you can see this was implemented in January of 21, I believe. And you see the jump in how often, because it basically pulls everything together. You can go into the course, you can watch the course, you can do your certificate of completion right in there. It's very handy and has brought a lot more people to using that once they got used to it. It looks like September was the busiest month last year. But I think it's been beneficial to have that packaged up nicely. Once you log in, you can kind of just go in and check. Most of the webinars are recorded. You can go back in and watch them as well. Many webinar series, member only ones, premium member webinar series, you know, kind of the multi-day ones, fire service webinar series, things focused on what the fire service is looking for. Likewise, the women in fire protection engineering. Those tend to be a little bit more on the networking side and sometimes best practices in terms of overall working and being more efficient and trying to be better within, you know, more successful in the field. Research webinars, we're seeing more and more of that, especially as the foundation is really rolling a lot more data back out after awarding different scholarships and things like that. And then the perspective webinars, which we can learn from industry leaders, what's going on out there, how are things going, what are their new technologies, that kind of thing. And I don't know, the pictures didn't show up, but thank you to all the 2021, here they are. 2021 volunteer webinar presenters, quite a few, and we appreciate all of these volunteers because they make a lot of things possible. So live webinars, as you can see, 2020 there was quite a bit, but as you recall, nobody could go anywhere in 2020, but it really opened up an opportunity to be able to really increase our ability to deliver content without having to go anywhere. A little less of that now that we're kind of getting back into going to meetings, and I suspect you could see the attended versus registered. Folks thought they could attend and probably got pulled to a meeting or had to travel again. It's a balance of managing that, but it has been increasing, and we're getting better at providing those because we've learned a lot in the last couple of years. Here's the annual conference history. The numbers were growing quite nicely. 2020 was virtual, so the numbers kind of stayed up just about where we were in Phoenix, for instance. But obviously that was virtual, a little different. But Baltimore, that meeting was put together a little bit later than usual and had a really great turnout considering what we were still experiencing at that time. So I think it's healthy, to see after what we've been through. And it was a really good meeting. People really appreciated the networking again. But at the same time, we're still providing those other virtual venues that people can be involved. PBD conference, the performance-based design conference history. Auckland, last time we had it in 2020 was right when things started closing down in the world. Auckland is pretty far too, so it had pretty high attendance considering what was located. And then of course in 2022, because we hold this conference every other year, it was supposed to be in Copenhagen, but it became virtual. We will be back in Copenhagen in a couple of years for the next one. But there was 211 participants virtually. Didn't make quite the same revenue because virtual is just a different experience. You don't have the same registration costs and things like that. So for professional development initiatives underway, more and more trying to define a core curriculum that focuses in on the core competencies. So we want to develop courses that align with that. Keep enhancing the PE exam review course with more on-demand content to go along with it. Maybe broken down into smaller pieces, with more detail. Enhancing virtual events to include local and regional. And then of course the specialty events focused on specific topics. We just had the first one last week, which was amazing, the storage symposium. And it was a nice time to deep dive into one topic, and it was very well attended. And I think it was 96 attendees for the first time we did it. And UL was a fantastic partner in that one. We even got to see a fire test. So on the foundation, Peter Senes is the chair of the Board of Governors. Leslie Marshall is foundation director. We're looking for a new research manager, and we have Amy Zuby, who is the donor relations manager. As you might recall, this was founded in 1979 as the SFP Educational and Scientific Foundation. The mission's a little different. It's enhanced the scientific understanding of fire and its interaction with the natural and built environment. So it's not as applied, if you will. It's the research that backs what we end up doing. So it facilitates the engineering research focused on all the different topics that we would think: fire risks, safety, mitigation, control, and human response, facilitate development of engineering methods, and provide education and research opportunities. Get those younger engineers involved. This is the foundation Board of Governors and the different committees. They have executive, finance, awards, technical. This is the 2021. When you see these names, it may have shifted for 2022. Technical and education, fundraising and communication, FEMA Project Advisory Council, and Academic Leadership Council. As we'll talk about, the foundation got a grant from FEMA, which is pretty exciting stuff. And the Academic Leadership Council, which has been an amazing experience, brought together a lot of folks. So how do they support themselves as a foundation? It's grants, SFPE support, corporate donors, SFP chapters. If you recall from our meetings, the chapters often give donations to the foundation, individual members, plan giving and bequests, and external partnerships and affiliations. And I feel like this is really being championed by folks like Peter, like Leslie, really taking the foundation to a level that is amazing to me to see it grow like it is. They work with the research roadmap that is established by SFPE through the RTM. And they use this to kind of put together proposals and administration. And what Leslie especially, and I know Peter, they focus on how does this relate to other areas? So how does fire fit into the bigger picture? And it really has made a big difference looking at it that way, to get us at the table that we should be to make a difference when it comes to fire safety. So there's a lot of focus on grant making, scholarships, and awards within the foundation. So for 2021 fundraising highlights, they exceeded their goal. Chapter donations were over 15,000, corporate over 94,000, individuals over 57,000, and 41% of these individual donations came from outside the US. I think that's pretty impressive. And we received a grant in 2020 from FEMA for fire prevention and safety. to having to do with the Wildland Urban Interface project for just over 147,000. And the foundation very much thanks for all the donations that they receive. And of course, too, they have also corporate donors, gigawatt over 25,000, megawatt over 10,000 or 10,000 plus, and kilowatt 5,000 plus. All very much appreciated and really taking, I think, in the end, takes fire engineering to the next level as we really invest in ourselves. And you see, this is the thank you to the chapters. We see as far away as New Zealand, we have New England, we have Portugal, Missouri, Kansas, Central Savannah River, Southern Ontario. So it's really good to see these donations coming in, and they're very much appreciated. Basically, in 2021, they were able to give out 125,000 plus in research and awards in 21. So there was 3 projects that were completed: research project in 21, anthropodic data and movement speeds, development of fire engineering practitioner tools, and design fire and material performance database. Right, this year, these projects, these 2 were funded and launched in 21, so they're still in process. Water supply and climate change, and environmental health impacts of fire and suppression activities during large scale events. Both very, very impactful and link back to the research roadmap. All of them do well, and things that are really relevant that people are looking for information about. A student research grants is also key. They're giving away 5 to 8 per year, each 5,000 per awardee. And they're looking at, and they're all over the world, you'll see in a minute, any student researching fire protection or fire safety engineering. We're really promoting, looking for schools that we don't necessarily think of, but they are doing fire engineering work. And the applications are due twice a year, May and November. I'm not going to go into all of this, but if you can see on this, this is the 21 student research grants awarded. We have 2 from the US, 1 from the UK, 1 from South Africa, and 1 from Malaysia. So if we're an international organization, it's really, really showing through this, those who are looking for research awards. And there is awards and scholarships through the foundation. These are the 2 award winners for 21 for the foundation for Gillian Prue, actually 2 of several, award for human behavior, and then Student Scholar Award recognizes high performance students conducting research. And both of the, one has $5,000 scholarship and the other $1,000. And of course, the Arthur B. Guise Medal, which was given to Dr. Gandhi from UL this past year, and Jack Bono Award for Engineering Communication is given, and was given to a group here, Bayan Sun, Roland Bishop, Huang Mu, and Zion Huang on the review of battery fires and electric vehicles. And this new award, this is the first award winner from Stellenbosch University, South Africa, Anye Ubakwa. I'm not sure if I said his name correctly, but I think it's just important to note this one, Fred W. Maurer Global Scholar Award, is intended to be folks outside sort of the typical North American, I guess, US, I suppose, members or students, and it's endowed by Kathleen Elmon. It's a $1,000 US scholarship. New initiative, of course, as I mentioned, the foundation has received a FEMA grant, which is pretty exciting stuff. This is a whole new level, I believe, for the foundation. It's putting engineering resources into the hands of fire departments operating in the wildland urban interface. And the foundation manages this project, includes representatives from, I mean, there's more than this, but it also includes SFP Fire Service Subcommittee member representatives. Virtual workshop was held in December of 21 with 20 plus fire department representatives. They're piloting the tool. You'll hear more about it at the meeting in October. There's a session on it, and there will be a symposium, I believe, next year, maybe virtual, on this topic, but you'll see more and more about this topic because clearly, as we all know, this is very relevant to what we do and is an important issue. The other key thing with the foundation is Academic Leadership Council. There's over 30 departments globally that are involved in this. They meet twice a year, emails, communication monthly. Really has brought a lot more students to know about us. I think it's helped us grow our chapters internationally. Really important stuff. and it really enhances our visibility internationally as well. And there's, sharing. It's a great networking. We get to know the universities. It would help us in the long run with grants and things like that. So it's really important to SFPE as well. And one of the things that they wanted to do when the foundation sort of was coming back or kind of growing in its new generation or new look to it was to make sure that when we give grants that we see and hear what happened, like what's being published, what did we learn, to make sure we communicate all of that. And so you're seeing this with these webinar series. I think it's been really useful. And a lot of the information is on the foundation website to see who the award winners were and what they were presenting on and more information like that. In the past, we haven't really maybe communicated as much. That was a big push when bringing the foundation to the sort of next generation that it is entering into. And they presented chapters and provide more information to the chapters as to what they're doing and why, and communicating. It's all about communicating, their message and what they're doing, and how, providing some support would make it even better than where it was before. So in summary, we've had another year of disruption. Every year it's a new level. Just when we think it's about to be normal again, we realize it actually isn't, but we're all adapting, I think, fairly well as best we can. But I think considering all that, SFP really has remained quite solid and has navigated this situation the last couple of years very well. Virtual PBD conference had a higher attendance, but of course, as I noted, a lower revenue because it's a different kind of conference. Annual conference was lower attendance and revenue last year, but the fact that we were able to do it in person was pretty amazing and a great event, hoping for even better this year. The enhanced LMS and virtual education offerings is really, in a way, I feel like COVID has been a silver lining to really propel an SFP taking the opportunity to make that even better than we were before. Peer review document, Tall Buildings Guide, big achievements, I think, and we're moving ahead with other achievements. Significant investment in the foundation. It's like a whole new page that we've turned with the foundation. The Grand Challenges, if you're familiar, was an amazing way to connect what we do, not just the foundation, but what we do as fire engineers to the world of problems of new technologies, of sustainability, of climate change, all of those things. We need to connect ourselves to that. And I think that is a really good way to start. And develop Academic Research Council, which brought together a lot more folks than in the past. We've always thought about the same schools, if you will, and this brought in a lot of other schools and very international. And launched the Wildland Urban Interface initiative to contribute engineering knowledge to the global wildfire crisis, which is exciting. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. So I thank you for being allowed to present this today. And I'm looking for 2022 to be just as successful or more so. Thank you.